واسمي يا حبيبي مدينتي وحكايتي.
That was from today's guest's new film in which he stars, It Must Be Heaven, a famed figure in Palestinian cinema. We know him for The Time That Remains and Divine Intervention, which introduced him to a wider audience and won the 2002 Cannes Jury Prize. Welcome to the show, Elia Suleiman. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Now, the premise for the new film is that you're playing yourself, travelling abroad from Nazareth, coming to Paris and then to New York, trying to speak to producers about getting a film made. Now, your other films showed us surreal life in Palestine. Why did you choose to leave your hometown?
Simply because of the global political ambience that I thought it's become more necessary to speak about global issues. And since I've lived in these places and I've written a lot of notes about them, I thought I would go now to the extremity of talking about what the world looks like today, but in a burlesque fashion with humor. And so that's why I decided to do that.
So what does the world look like today?
Terrible. I think there's much more despair and quite a lot less hope. And I think the situation doesn't look really great for whatever department you consider, if it's from the political to the economic to the ecosystem. So I think it was more necessary now to actually consider the world a global Palestine, if you think about it. There's tension everywhere, and there's states of emergency everywhere, and there's police everywhere. You go to the airport and you're really traumatized from being a number. And so this film is about that, but of course, you don't do a film about anything. You start from the idea that you want to do an image, that you want to do a cinematic language. That always turns out to be about something anyway.
Well, let's take a look at a clip from the film where we see the actor Gael Garcia Bernal introducing your character to his wife.
Yeah, let me present you to my very good friend, Elia Suleiman. He's a Palestinian filmmaker.
Nice to meet you.
But he makes funny films. Mm-hmm. He's doing a comedy right now about peace in the Middle East.
That's funny already.
It's called Heaven Can Wait.
Okay. Sweetie, we're sort of late, so do you mind if we go now?
Yes.
Good luck with your film. It was a pleasure to meet you.
So there he says that your films, they're not angry, they're not preachy, they're funny. But the way he says it, but they're funny, it's like he's saying being Palestinian and a director of comedy is kind of incompatible.
Yes.
Why do you choose comedy?
I don't know if we choose what we do. I was brought up in a family that was quite tender and loving and very, very funny. And I was the youngest. And I think the humor just came from there, actually. It was not really a strategy at all. I have not watched, in fact, like particularly, comic films or anything like this.
But as a Palestinian filmmaker, there is this attempt, as you go around the world giving your interviews, to interpret every scene as a kind of allegory of Middle Eastern politics, like the sparrow, for example, who flies through the window. I've seen articles written like, is the sparrow Israel? Is the sparrow the question of your Palestinian identity? Or is it just the sparrow?
I think the world, a lot of the people, especially in the press, sometimes tend to overanalyze. And in particular, actually, this bird was the very most challenging idea for me, was to make a scene that was absolutely purified of any signifiers. In other words, it was my challenge to make a scene that absolutely just meant what it is. So it's kind of a pure poetic scene. And so because they didn't find the angle to how to translate it, it becomes like, what does this bird look like? But in fact, a lot of the film, of course, you can always, after you see the film, say, oh, this might have been about this or about that, or it's talking about us, about our persons, and about global violence, maybe. But the fact is, you don't start making a film from this. You start by, watching a very funny moment in the street, and you think this is going to, crack, this is going to make people laugh, this is going to be enjoyable to actually work with, and this is how you actually work. So, but the fact, because we still live in this kind of post-colonial discourse, being Palestinian is always attached to my filmmaking. I see the same thing happening about women, which is quite disturbing, because always you see this women film festival, and it's a woman filmmaker. Why? You say man filmmaker? So I think there is something still ghettoizing about the categorization of the race, color, and gender, which also I happen to be in that category.
Okay, well, there's a retrospective of your films at Paris's Cinémathèque in December. We spoke to the director, Frédéric Bonneau, about your work. Let's take a listen.
What is surprising is that we could expect him to be a political director, somewhat militant, a flag bearer for the Palestinian cause. And in a way, he is all that. But you could say his biggest cinematic influences are Buster Keaton or Jacques Tati. In order to recount the progressive disappearance of his people, he has invented a cinematic language that is absolutely original, singular, and funny.
There we go. You're in nearly every scene of It Must Be Heaven, but you hardly speak, which kind of makes it a silent comedy with a collection of episodes with you as a kind of impassive spectator. Talk to us about this choice of silence and not speaking in your films.
I think from my first short film, it was an intuition that I was part of the silence in the film. And there's quite a lot of silence in the film, actually. My films are not very talky. And it just felt that way. It felt that my presence there is not about a protagonist. It was about a sort of transparent kind of guidance of some sort. And I think because I like to maximize the potentiality of the images to say what they have to say and to open to the spectator all the possibilities of their own democratic reading of the image. And I don't like to impose verbal, informative language. And I think I'm very careful about verbal language because it can be easily abused. Otherwise, I don't really have an answer. I don't come from a silent cinema background, of course. I mean, I'm old, but not that old. I just feel like the spectator can have also a certain, let's say, they can feel like they're part of the making of the film.
Can I talk, though, about the 3 words that you do say in the film?
Yes.
You're asked by a New York taxi driver what country you hail from. You reply, Nazareth, then I'm Palestinian. There's also this warning from a tarot card reader that a Palestinian state will not be seen in your lifetime. Are you pressing this fact that your national identity exists only as an adjective and not as a noun?
I mean, the whole film, raises and banalizes identities. I think this scene is also stressing the fact that I am Palestinian and that, due to the geopolitics of the region, we became also Arab Israelis, which is a term I absolutely refuse. And I have nothing to do with Israel. Israel came and imposed itself on us and imposed identity card and passports. But I have no affiliation, no cultural connection to Israel whatsoever. So it was important for me to say Nazareth is inside of Israel, but I am not Israeli in cultural terms. Other than that, I mean, I don't. The thing is, we shouldn't take it too literally. The story of Palestine being established in my time or not. The fact is, I don't believe in states. I have absolutely also no identifications with statehood. I feel like what's really essential politically, morally, and ethically is justice. And I always said that I will fight for Palestine for the Palestinian flag to be raised, but when it will be raised, I'm going to fight for it to be lowered down. Simply because my issue is not about borders. My issue is about people having simply equality, that they are living in a secular society, that they choose whatever they want to do in a democratic state of being.
The character in the film, Elia Suleiman, is kind of searching for a home, a place to be. I wanted to ask you, where's your home?
I'm still looking, actually. I don't know. I'm considering my home wherever I am. I mean, I would say New York is maybe is spiritually, because that's from Nazareth and New York is how I became a filmmaker, actually. I would say then Paris becomes, I was living in Beirut for a little while, London. You know, feeling at home is also something to do with emancipating and feeling in a kind of identification with the culture that you live. It's not just, you know, the concept of, you know, a physical home. I don't know if I found that place. You know, for a while, I used to think the only alternative place would have been Beirut because of its cultural proximity, actually, and because I'm married to a Lebanese woman. Well, we know what's happening in Lebanon at the moment. Let's wait and see.
Okay, Elia Suleiman, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for being here. And there's a retrospective of your work at Paris' Cinémathèque at the start of December. And your film, It Must Be Heaven, is out in France on the 4th of December. Now, we're going to end with the re-release of the 1924 comedy film Sherlock Jr., directed by and starring Buster Keaton, someone you're often compared to.
Yes.
Remember our website. We're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.